Welcome to the commentary booth, where we watch and you guessed it, commentate on the week that was in movies and TV. I'm your host and play-by-play commentator Jamie Apps, and each week I'm joined by a rotating cast of colour commentators to help you find your next viewing treat. This week I'm joined by an impact fee technician who lists their favourite movie as A Nightmare on Elm Street and favourite TV show as Golden Girls. Welcome back to the show, Corrina Mabey.
Heyo! What's up? How's it going?
Not too much. Excited for another episode in our Last of Us series of reviews. This week looking at episode 3.
Yes. I love looking forward to these. It's my favorite.
The problem with recording early, though, is we don't have the official title for this episode yet. So, at the moment it is literally just episode 3.
I'm okay with that. It gives it, mystery. You don't know what's going to happen yet. So, I'm good with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like chapters in a video game, too.
Yeah, true.
See? Yeah.
So, this episode, this one is I think the biggest divergence away from the game, purely because, like we've mentioned in previous reviews, with this show they are able to show us perspectives that we couldn't get in the game by playing as Joel or Ellie. So this one is our Frank and Bill episode. Overall, before we dive in too deeply, what did you think of this episode?
It's probably one of the saddest episodes.
Probably.
So it is the saddest episode so far.
I feel like this was the heaviest of them all so far.
I'm kind of glad that this was not in the game, because I feel like if I had gotten that far in the game to this point, I would have just bawled my eyes out and quit.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
In the game, we kind of get
cried.
Subtle hints to this being the story, but there are a few changes along the way, so...
Yeah.
Episode 1 of this season starts really heavy with, a couple of major deaths early. But, this whole episode is all about love. For watching these two guys fall in love and then, incredibly sad, tragic moment at the end.
Yeah, why did it have to do that? I was happy with it. The couple that we saw, all right, so-and-so died, that's cool, whatever, I'm sad. This was oh, here's this strong connection with this amazing couple of people, and then we're going to destroy your soul.
Mm-hmm.
And make you cry. Super cry.
By the end of this episode, we're 3 episodes into the season, and we've had, 2 deaths in episode 1?
Yeah.
No. 3,
What?
because there was that random... The dude that screwed Tess over with the battery, he died.
Yes.
Robert, Sarah,
died.
and then the
random little kid.
Random kid. So we get 3 in episode 1, Tess in episode 2, and then Bill and Frank in episode 3.
Can we just calm it down?
We're on...
Please calm it down, HBO. Please.
3 episodes in, 6 people are dead. Great, thanks. Plus the millions of other people that have been infected.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about that.
Oh wait, episode 1 had the old couples, old family too. So we had 3 extra
dead.
people.
Yeah. So what is it? We'll just round it up to a nice 10.
Yeah, in 3 episodes. I think that perfectly sums up The Last of Us. Everyone dies.
I would like it if nobody else died, but I feel like that is inevitable. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot more deaths to come, particularly episode 4.
I could have lived without that information.
Mm-hmm.
Just let me live my happy fantasy world where everybody's just okay after a while, or I don't know.
Yeah.
I know it wouldn't be a monumental game if there weren't a lot of close related deaths to the characters, but still.
Yeah, it wouldn't be The Last of Us without a bunch of deaths.
Yeah. Thanks.
So now, as we dive into the episode, this episode starts with Joel building his little rock tower monument for Tess in the wilderness beside a river 10 miles west of Boston. I thought that was a really heartfelt, touching way to start, and continues this tone of the season being quite sad.
Yeah, I definitely think that that's an accurate assessment. I'm glad that he didn't just call it a day and just be like, all right, well, she's dead. There's nothing we can do. Be cold-hearted versus his approach to it, where he wanted to at least do her the justice of having a mini little grave or something like that to remember her by.
Yeah, he got to have his own little moment alone and to sort of process it and grieve.
Yeah.
Although very briefly. And then we sort of get to see him being quite fatherly and comforting as well, after we talked about how Ellie took Tess's death quite sadly and heavily. We see Joel give Ellie his jacket so she can stay warm in the woods, and I love her comment where it's her first time being in the woods because she's kind of grown up in the quarantine zone, and her little joke line of, "It's a lot more bugs than I thought."
Yeah, I think it really gets to show just how foreign everything is to Ellie, outside of the wall. I think people understand the gist of it where she's never seen the outside, but I don't think they really fully comprehend just how new everything is for her. So by her even just making those little comments, it really goes to show that she really has no idea what's out there and what's waiting for her out there, kind of.
Yep. And then we sort of continue the story with them kind of building their connection when Ellie says to Joel, "Nobody made you do this. You simply needed a truck battery, so don't blame yourself and don't blame me for this because it's not my fault."
Yeah.
Which I thought was really good because you can sort of see in Pedro's performance in that moment, Joel realizes that, yeah, Ellie is right. He can't blame her. He can't blame himself. This is just the way this world is at the moment.
Yeah, it's kind of like a grown-up thing for her to say. You don't expect someone her age to have those kind of thought processes or be that mindful of everything going around her. But I think it kind of just shows her maturity level and the fact that because of the environment that she's grown up in, it just made her that much more hardened, I think, to certain things.
Yeah, I feel...
And made her realize that the truths and the matters.
Yeah, kind of every sort of kid in this universe has had to grow up quite quickly, because if you don't, if you try and be a kid for too long, you are not going to survive in this world.
Yeah, none of the kids really have the childlike mindset that you would expect a teenager to have. They all have a more adult mindset. They're very aware of, what's going on with the fireflies and, things like that. So it's very interesting to see her take on that kind of a responsibility of sounding like an adult.
Mm-hmm. And then from there, they continue their epic journey so far. So in those first couple of episodes, we've seen them go from Joel starts out in San Antonio, they end up in Boston, and then we begin this episode 10 miles west of Boston, but then they have a 5-hour hike ahead of them, and Ellie she continues to sort of showcase how scared she is without outright saying, "I'm scared of this." She kind of just, she's questioning Joel, are they infected on this path? Have you been this way before? And
yeah,
Joel is kind of no, but he's continually on the lookout, making sure there's not people or anything around. And I think that shows that he's still a little bit nervous about, or even after having been out in this world for so many times and pretty much encountering everything possible, he thinks.
Yeah.
He's still a little bit wary of his surroundings all the time, and Ellie kind of has to pick up on that and do the same.
Absolutely, yeah. I think he's he's just showing her, it's not necessarily that he's scared, but he is aware that there are other things out there, even though they might not come across them, regardless if it's an infected or just another group of people that decide that they just don't like them or something like that. Which I don't think Ellie really realizes that there could be more than just infected out there. I don't think she realizes the dangers of everything going on outside.
Yeah, and like even if you travel down this path hundreds of times successfully in the past, doesn't mean it's still safe. Like,
No,
still
things
keep your
change
head
on
on a swivel.
the daily. Yeah.
And then we get them to have another bonding moment when she asks Joel about the scar on his head. And she makes a very Ellie comment, makes it a bit of a joke. And is it something lame like you fell down the stairs?
Yeah.
Which
I love that.
Joel responds saying, no, someone shot at me and missed. It happens more often than you think. Which is, I think, like trying to highlight to her, like, yeah, just because you have a gun, even though he doesn't know that she has a gun, like, just because we have a gun doesn't mean we're safe. Like, you can't
Right.
guarantee that you're going to hit everyone every time. And
Yeah,
it's also
100%.
like a joke at the game too, because guns were one of the, they were in the game and they were helpful, but yeah, they weren't really the point of call when you got into action sequences. They were like, I'm being swamped now. Okay, it's time to use the gun.
Oh, yeah. No, it's weird that you say that because I remember briefly when I did play it, and anytime I'm in a first person shooter game, I always end up like stabbing things. Probably when I shouldn't. I'd be like in a horde of things and I'll just still stab everywhere. Probably why I die a lot. But I also forget what button is a trigger button on a gun sometimes. So, because I go from like the PS4 controller to the Switch controller and they're opposite flip flops sometimes. So I always kind of just screw myself over in that and I end up shanking things all the time.
Yeah, like I remember when I was playing this, that my first option was always try to sneak around and stab as many things as possible. And then if I got into trouble, then it was like, okay, I can't continue to sneak around. I can't get away from these. It's time to use the guns, and all guns blazing at that point.
Yeah.
They continue, they get through part of their hike and they arrive at Cumberland Farms, which is apparently a stash house for Joel, even though he can't exactly remember where he stashed the stuff.
I think it's really funny that they used an actual gas station in the game too. Like, I always find it really funny when like games do that, where they take actual places and put them in the games versus just like a generic, gas station name or whatever. So for me, because there's like a Cumberland Farms down the road from my house, it was just really like funny for me to see that in that.
I guess it helps to make this a much more grounded and real experience rather than just being generic gas station.
Yeah, it was really just a funny thing to me because I didn't expect it. So.
And I loved the moment where they walk into the gas station and Ellie like flips out because there's a Mortal Kombat machine. I thought that was really cute and like adds that sense of kid-like wonder to her, because up until this point she has been like quite adult and mature.
Yeah, I think you see like a little spark of like her, maybe like her old self, like, or some form of like her trying to relive something that she wishes she still had, maybe, or something, versus having to do this now that she's doing.
And then as she prepares to go and explore, she asks Joel, is there anything bad in here? And we get the first time where Joel says, no, just you.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, which is a fun little joke that continues on through the season, where anytime she wants to go and explore somewhere and asks, is it okay? Like, is there anything bad in here? Joel's always like, no, just you.
Makes sense. That's like that kind of like small, like fatherly, like joking manner that he has with her. I think it just shows like he really does care about her and stuff.
Yeah, they're starting to form their connection. And then Ellie does the classic horror movie thing where she finds a dark manhole, trap hole thing and decides, I'm going to jump in there. Like, what are you doing?
Of course.
That's a terrible idea. Don't jump in random dark holes when there might be zombie
Of course
infected.
you do that. You always do that in games. That's where the best stuff usually is.
Well, she finds something down there. A couple of things, actually.
Yeah.
And it felt extra stupid because of, in one of the earlier episodes, Joel was telling her about how the fungus grows faster and stronger underground. And she's just like, I'm just jump in this hole. Like, no.
Oops. My bad. I'm curious.
And then,
What's down here?
yeah, once she's down there, she finds a box of tampons.
Necessary.
And a trapped infected who's like stuck under some rubble, and when it first like makes a noise, that's pretty scary because she's in this dark hole by herself and you're kind of like, uh-oh, how's she going to get out of this? And then camera pans around and we see that he's trapped, and we get a real close-up look of the cordyceps growth and infection on him, and it's like, oh geez, that is really disturbing looking.
Yeah, it was pretty gnarly. I think that was like really her first, like one of her first up close encounters with one that's not like attacking her essentially, so she can kind of more like examine it, especially because it's an alive specimen versus the dead ones that they saw in the previous episode. So I think she's more intrigued by it to try and understand it a little bit, I think. Not that that's the best idea to go and look at it.
Mm-hmm. But then we also get like her sadistic side as well, where in the first episode when Joel beats up that soldier, you sort of see Ellie in the background kind of being like, ooh, I'm kind of into this violent side. And yeah, this moment she gets to sort of act that out herself when she crouches down and she slices its forehead open before like killing it, just to sort of see what's under the skin, and then she just puts it out of its misery and like stabs it in the head. And I was like, Ellie, that was really sadistic and gross.
Yeah, it was a grody scene even for me to watch, and I've watched some gross shit, but that was just one of those like cringy kind of moments. Like anything that has like stuff like pus or something like that comes out of a wound, it's like, whoa, gross.
Yep.
So yeah, that was a very big yuck factor for me. But I mean, I guess it gives her a little bit more character, and like you can kind of see now where she's, I think, starting to become more comfortable with the fact that she's going to have to defend herself, or she at least realizes that she might get into situations where she has to learn to defend herself. So, you know, it's as weird as it is, I'm kind of like, I was almost kind of like proud of her for having that moment, because, you know, if something bad had happened, Joel wouldn't have known where the heck it was coming from initially, so she would have had to take it into her own hands.
Yeah, and you kind of see in her eyes she has that same look as in the escape from the QZ scene, and yeah, I think it makes you realize, yeah, she's totally capable of handling anything that comes her way, even though she is a 14-year-old girl. She's willing and able to kill things if she needs to.
Yeah, she's a little badass. I'd have Team Ellie on with me any day.
And then she climbs back up out of the hole, reunites with Joel, who is stashing the assault rifle, and she seems really confused and annoyed by this, but Joel says, yeah, it's because there's no ammo for this type of gun. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's heavy, so why bring it if you don't need it?
Yeah, especially if you got no ammo for it. It's just a waste of time. And I think that's also another like reference to the games where sometimes you would be carrying a gun and just wouldn't be able to find ammo anywhere in the world, and just like, oh god, why do I even have this? This is just annoying.
I didn't expect that like to be in the game, but I mean it makes sense, and it gives it like that much more of a real feel. But that's a really interesting kind of thing that they did, I guess, with it.
Yeah, that's the fun part with the game. It doesn't the game doesn't overload you with resources unless you play it on like one of the lower difficulties. That's one of the bigger things you notice as you put the difficulty level up on the game. You just get less and less resources in the world.
Oh yeah, no, easy mode all day, please. Give me all the ammo every corner. I'm cool.
Mm-hmm. So then they continue on their journey, and we get to see one of the major scenes that they used, I think, in the first like reveal photo in the marketing, the Ellie and Joel looking at the plane crash wreckage, and I thought that looked incredible. And I love how Ellie's like kind of jealous of Joel having flown in
Yeah,
the
she's like,
past. She's like, you were in that
you've been in the
sky.
sky? Yeah, it's just such an innocent thing for someone to say. But it's like, oh wow, you've been up there? Like that's crazy. And you can tell she's kind of overwhelmed. I think she's kind of on like sensory overload when she essentially sees it because it's just so new to her to see that kind of thing going on. Like,
In that moment, this is where they sort of give a lot more expanding on the lore of how the outbreak began, with Ellie asking how it started. Her hypothesis is that it was monkeys, which is very funny because that's kind of very closely to COVID, but
that's always the theory whenever something breaks out. It's always monkeys.
yep. Yeah, the old outbreak movies and stuff like that, they were funny.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, Joel says, I thought you went to school. And she's like, no, I went to federal school. It was shitty and didn't teach me how your shitty government failed to prevent a pandemic. I was like, oh, that's funny commentary and probably going to be memed to like totally memed galore
Everything.
once this episode
Everything.
airs.
Yep. I'm waiting for it.
But then Joel kind of explains his theory, which is that cordyceps got into the food supply via either flour, sugar, or water or something like that. And he basically says if you eat enough of it, you would have become infected. He believes the tainted food probably hit the shelves on, say, Thursday. People were buying it Thursday, eating it Thursday night, Friday morning. And then the more that they sort of consumed it, they became infected. And then the outbreak kicks off on that Friday night. And
Which is a really good theory, honestly. Like, it's a genius way of looking at it, really. Because you never know. Like, ever. It's kind of scary, honestly, if you think about it that way, too.
yeah, it's very logical in terms of like a fungus could easily grow in like a bag of flour or sugar or something like that.
Absolutely. 100%. I mean, if you have something on the shelf long enough, sometimes they have like little bugs in them when you open it up. So, I mean, it's nothing for something to actually develop in there.
And Joel's theory actually kind of confirms a theory that was proposed after episode 1, that the cordyceps was probably in flour because the world's largest flour mill, like in real life, is in Jakarta. And we're shown the outbreak beginning in Jakarta, that second episode, actually.
Yes.
So, and they talk about it happening at a factory. So
yeah,
that makes me think that's pretty close. We also, in
that's really interesting.
That very first episode, Joel, Sarah, and Tommy all miraculously avoid eating flour-based products.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, because they're having like scrambled eggs for breakfast.
They have no pancake mix, so they don't eat flour.
Yeah, the pancake mix is gone. Yeah, so they just have like scrambled eggs.
They turn down the biscuits from the neighbours because Joel is on Atkins.
Yeah. But yet you see the guy only feeding the old lady the biscuits in the beginning too.
Yep.
Which also goes with that.
Yep. And then
they made cookies, but she didn't take any cookies home.
Yeah, because they were Ryzen, not choc chip, so she doesn't eat.
Right.
She doesn't eat any on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
And then Joel forgot the birthday cake.
Right. Yeah.
So there's
no cake.
Yeah, a whole bunch of things that kind of make you think, yeah, maybe Joel was right, and it was in flour.
That is really an interesting, like looking back at that now, that's a really interesting theory that I never would have caught on to before. But that's mind-boggling.
Yeah,
Wow.
so pretty much, I'm pretty sure Joel was correct in his little assumption and theory.
Damn.
And this episode is the one that confirms that the outbreak day happened Friday night, September 26, 2003 in the series. And they basically say that, yeah, it happened Friday night, but by Monday morning, everything was gone, and Ellie looks like totally devastated by how quickly it all happened. She's just like, wow, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane.
And then Ellie is like continuing on the path, and Joel weirdly tries to divert them and take a random offshoot, and Ellie can't work out why, but she is determined in her stubborn little feisty way to continue down the path because there's no
Yeah.
serial killers or axe murderers,
Right.
so she's fine with going down this path. But then they stumble across a mass grave, which I think breaks Ellie's heart in that moment, especially when Joel kind of explains what it was with on Outbreak Day, the soldiers started collecting people from towns, telling them they were going to be taken to quarantine zones, but only the truth was only if
They
there
weren't.
was space in those quarantine zones. If not, they were just going to
Yeah.
kill everyone. So not everybody was necessarily infected. Some of those people were totally healthy.
Yeah, it was a really sad moment. Like that part really hit me. Just watching Ellie's reaction to learning about that was really really sad, and the fact that they went in depth in the episode and showed like potential like daily, what those people did during the day, and then getting on like the truck and being told, oh yeah, you're going to this place. Like if they hadn't like shown like that little like backstory, like
Yeah, the little
moment,
flashback.
yeah, the little flashback, I don't think it would have been as bad. But the fact that like you actually got to see these people and they really believed it, and then boink, they're right over there in the mass grave.
Yeah, and I think we sort of see Ellie, she goes from heartbroken to just angry and confused as to why they would do that. And Joel basically says, dead people can't become infected. So that was kind of their reasoning rather than just leaving them out in these outlying towns.
Yeah, unfortunately, it was like their version of like population control at that point, in a really twisted sense.
Yeah, well, I guess, yeah, they just kind of, they couldn't fit them in a quarantine zone, but they also didn't want to have extra people out in the wild that could then become infected and overrun the quarantine zone. So, yeah,
Yeah.
very sad moment. But during that flashback to the sort of mass genocide of the town is when we're introduced to good old Bill hiding out in his underground bunker.
That guy's wonderful. He's so cool. I love him. There's like a movie, like a really old movie, where they have like a crazy neighbor that's like that, and he like has like a whole bomb shelter ready to go and stuff, and he's always like strapped full of like ammo and like guns and shit. And I'm like, oh my god, that's what Bill's like in this show. I'm like, holy crap, he's just ready for doomsday. And like doomsday preppers to the max.
Yeah, full-on doomsday prepper. Played by Nick Offerman, which was a very interesting casting choice, but I think he does a phenomenal job throughout this episode. Much better than I would have initially expected, because he's kind of known for his comedy
He usually
roles.
does like comedy stuff. Yeah. So it was really interesting to see him play such a serious, kind of down to earth, end of the world moment.
And so Con O'Neill from Chernobyl was originally cast in that role, but had to drop out because of a scheduling conflict. So, yeah, Nick was not the original choice, but I'm glad they sort of went with him. He looks a lot like the Bill from the games, and yeah, like we said, he gives a phenomenal performance. So, yeah, kind of one of those moments where it's like, maybe it was for the best that the other guy couldn't do it.
Yeah, I feel like that happens a lot. I mean, this one was really good. I think he gave it his all, and it worked out perfectly.
And then we get another sort of reference to the game with him exiting his bunker after everyone's left town in a full gas mask, which I thought was a cool thing, but then they quickly get rid of that. And he kind of appears happy that everyone's gone. He's like, I'm happy with this. Got a whole town to myself.
He doesn't worry about anything. Yeah, it's like his own little like oasis of happiness. He can do whatever he wants. He can build whatever he wants, or change everything. He doesn't have to mow the yard anymore. He doesn't have to keep up with the appearances and stuff. So he's living his best life.
And then, yeah, like you said, building, he goes into full prep mode where he starts barricading up the town, building a fence, raiding all the shops and the gas station to get as much fuel as he can, and even goes to Home Depot to get a few things.
He has like booby traps everywhere around the radius and stuff. It's great.
Yep. Full booby traps, fence, security cameras and alarms.
It's a fortress. It's like the people from Walking Dead would have been happy to have that guy on their team, is all I can say. Like, if they had Bill, they would have been fine.
Mm-hmm. And like when he's at Home Depot, the electricity and everything cuts off and he's like, oh, that was quicker than I expected, but makes a little detour and quickly goes and restores the water and gas supply to the town. So he's perfectly set in this town with his nice fence and basically self-sustaining town that has all these fruits and vegetables growing in the backyard. He's sweet as.
Yeah, it's great. I really loved the Home Depot scenario. Like, that just made me laugh really hard when I watched that, because it was like, if I were in that middle of that kind of, you know, pandemic or whatever, I'd do the same thing. Like, Home Depot would be one of my first stops.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I've always said if there was a zombie outbreak, I'm going to Bunnings, getting as much stuff as I need, and then I'm going to the shipping port and stealing one of those giant ships.
Yeah, I mean, why not?
You just go and park it off out in the ocean and just look at everything turn to shit.
Yeah, it'd be fine. You'll be good.
And I love that we sort of see that Bill is kind of a foodie. Even though he's all alone in this town by himself, he cooks himself up some like really high quality restaurant quality cuisine and pairs it with the perfect wines. He's like, oh, I'm totally happy cooking fancy dinners for myself and watching infected get blown away by my booby traps on the security cameras.
Yeah, it's great. It's his own form of entertainment, you know, dinner and a show. I mean, why not? When in Rome, right?
Yeah. And then we get a time jump. We go 4 years into the future, so 2007, when an alarm sounds, the camera pops up and there's nothing there. So he's like, okay, someone's fallen into my booby trap pit hole thing. He goes out and all we hear from inside the hole was, I'm not infected. And it's like, okay, now we're getting a bit cautious.
Would say.
So Bill gets very cautious. He asks, are you armed? And we get a nice delayed response from the person in the hole who says, no, I'm not. And then Bill, again, very wary, he's like, why'd you take so long to answer that?
Yeah. You should have been quicker, dude.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have to hide?
But the person answers, I thought about lying, but I just couldn't come up with a good reason to lie. I'm a very bad liar, so they just continue. He basically explains that I was from the Baltimore QZ, which has now been overrun, and somehow Bill has a testing device. I'm not sure where that was. Did someone, like, drop it during the like, when they were rounding everyone up, or what?
It could have happened. He could have found it randomly in a parking lot. He could have made it himself, although it looked really legit, so who knows?
Yeah, it was exactly the same as the
but
one
with
in
how
episode
prepared he
1,
was-
so...
Yeah. So, I mean, he could have swiped it. I mean, he was underground when everybody was, like, vacating or whatever, so I'm guessing that someone just dropped it on the ground. He goes, I wonder what this does.
Yeah,
And
I'm
just
assuming
keeps
it was
around.
just left behind or something, so he's just like, sweet, I'm going to use this anytime someone comes up to my town, and he tests the person, and he's fine. We learn that this person is Frank, and basically all Bill wants to do is send Frank on his way. He doesn't want any part of helping this guy. Frank manages to convince him to at least feed him, and then that's when their whole sort of story begins. They go back home. Bill allows Frank to have a shower, which would be pretty amazing after, 4 years of potentially not having great showers, just having cold water here and there where you can.
River. Yeah, if you find, like, a river or a lake or something and hope for the best.
Yeah, but Bill has hot water, running hot water, so he's sweet.
Yeah.
Although Frank does tell him later in the episode, go and have a shower. So maybe Bill's not the most fastidious about showering regularly.
Yeah, I mean, when you're by yourself and you're not trying to impress anybody, I guess, you know, anything goes, but, you know, if it's the end of the world and I have all the best kind of supplies and necessities, I'm going to take full advantage of it.
Yeah, I'm showering every day in that situation. Like, yeah, this is great.
Oh, yeah. Long shower, like hour and a half long showers given up to me.
I don't know if I'd go that far because I'd be super worried about my water just stopping and then be like, uh-oh.
All right, fine. Whatever. Longer than normal.
They sit down for a meal, and in this first meal, they're total opposite ends of the table, which I think, like, is fitting because, yeah, Bill is still a little bit cautious of this guy. Like, what's he up to, but by the end of the episode, they're sitting right next to each other, which shows great way to show like the growth in their relationship.
Yeah, no, I really liked that. It was really fun. Just you see Bill go from someone who's like super duper cautious, like don't come near me, to someone who's just like, all right, maybe he's not so bad.
Yeah, and
I could use somebody to talk to.
by the end of it, he's incredibly protective as well.
Yeah.
And Bill impresses Frank by pairing rabbit with the perfect wine, which at this moment is where you sort of go, there's some weird like sexual tension between these two.
Yeah, like you're not fooling anybody.
And then Frank goes and jumps on the piano, much to Bill's disgust in terms of how badly he plays this piano and sings. He's like, nope, not like that, nope.
Yeah, please stop.
So he steps in and shows Frank how it's done, and in this moment you see Frank look at Bill and you go, uh-oh, he just fell in love with this guy.
Yeah, it was a really sweet moment though. Like it's like the aha moment, and it's really cute and really sweet that they were able to come together at like the end of the world essentially kind of moment.
Especially when he asks, who is the girl you're singing about? And Bill basically just says, no, there's no girl. And it's, in that moment you realize, maybe Bill is also gay.
Yep.
Which is something in the game that was like alluded to, especially when Ellie finds his magazine stash. that was the moment that confirmed it. But in this episode, it's not until sort of this moment where you start to go, maybe. And they go to bed together. It's all fine, normal. And then we get another time jump 3 years later to 2010. And Frank is storming out of the house after having a massive argument, or whilst in the middle of a big argument. Like, oh, what's happened here? Why? They went from like super caring and loving to, okay, we're 3 years in the future and these guys are ready to kill each other after living alone for so long, which I guess makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you'd probably get on each other's nerves after a while of not having like an area to just like vent, or someone else to vent to, or even just a place to go blow off steam. That could get very, very repetitive.
And I loved Frank accusing Bill of believing the government are Nazis, and Bill's just response is, the government are all Nazis.
Yep. Like, it just proves that he was like a conspiracy theorist, and he had all these wild, wacky things. Like, he's exactly what you expect out of someone that was so well prepared like he was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then Frank just goes, yeah, they are now. They weren't before. Which I thought was funny, and another one of those things that's going to create a bunch of memes after this episode. I think this is going to be a very sort of viral episode.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is going to have a lot of different ones like that.
And during this argument is when we learn that Frank actually wants to work with other people outside of their little commune town, and Bill is not happy about this. He does not want to have any part in working with anyone or wasting resources on mowing the lawn and fixing up the boutique in town and the shops in town. He's like, no, why are we doing that? So that is not going to help us live any longer.
No, he's happy in his own little utopia where nobody else has to like know about them even being there. Like, you just live happily ever after together, essentially, with no problem. And
to close out the argument is Frank reveals that he's been talking to a nice woman on the radio, and whole boy is Bill furious at this, and we learn that the woman is Tess.
Yep. I like how they have like that normal, that's like your own like stereotypical like couples fight too, and it's so funny to see that because it's just the two of them, and there's nothing else that would have like no other couples that you could see that would be like going through the same kind of thing, so I don't have anybody to talk to about those kind of problems. So I think it's just really funny to watch that kind of play out.
As I was mentioning, this episode is a big change from the games, because in the games we never actually meet Frank. It's only Joel and Ellie we see interact with Bill in the the township that's like all gated off, and they get into a big battle at the end, and the town gets overrun. But this one, we get to see Joel and Tess interacting with Bill and Frank, and this is who they've been communicating with over the radio. And I like that Bill and Joel recognize that they're both very similar. They're both quite paranoid about dealing with other people, whereas Tess and Frank are like, no, if we all help each other, we'll be fine. Let's...
Yeah, and you can even tell, like, Bill and Joel, like, they don't like each other at all initially. Like, they are both very skeptical of the whole situation. They're not on board with it at all. Like, they would rather be on opposite sides of the world, far away from everybody. And, yeah, Tess and Frank are just, like, best buddies. Like, hey, how's it going?
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, they're like, you've
really
got stuff
funny.
I need, I've got stuff you need, let's just work together and help each other. Whereas Bill and Joel is like, nope.
Fend for yourself.
I don't trust you. I'm looking after my own interests and making sure me and my people are safe.
Yeah, it is really funny.
But then Joel does try to reassure Bill that, hey, at least the one person that you were talking to on the radio was Tess, and we're decent people.
Not someone else. Yeah, because that could have been a really dangerous game.
Yeah,
if
that
whoever was on the other line.
they could have come up,
Exactly.
spoken to anyone, and I think it's when Joel points out, yeah, your fence is aluminium and it's corroding already. It's not going to last all that long, but I have repairs back in the QZ that I can give you that will let you build a fence that will last the rest of your lifetimes. And I think that's when Bill kind of goes, okay, I guess I probably do need to work with this guy.
Yeah, he's not so bad after all. We kind of want the same things.
And that's when we hear Tess and Frank talk about their radio code as well. So that confirms that this was the people that were playing the 80s music in episode 1.
Yeah, that's really funny and like fun how it ties all together. You know, it just comes in like a big circle finally, and you get to understand that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that is again like showing how detailed and specific they have been in putting this show together to make sure it's all very accurate and not just random bits and pieces thrown in. Like, so far I don't think there's been like any plot holes in the first 3 episodes. Like, everything has made sense and felt like it fits in that universe.
Yeah, like anything that was an added bonus or something, it works with it.
Yeah, it's
not like an exaggeration.
It's all building on the stories of the game. It's not taking things away or adding unnecessary stuff. It's like all working to further the story, which is nice. And then we get one more time jump 3 years later to 2013, and Bill and Frank are on their little afternoon or morning run through town, and Bill's struggling to keep up, but they go to a patch of strawberries, which Frank traded Tess one of Bill's guns to get, which...
Yeah,
Bill is
it was hilarious to see his reaction.
Bill looks very annoyed to begin with until he tastes a strawberry, and then he's like, okay, yeah, no, that was probably a fair trade.
Yep. Didn't he say, like, what one was it or something like that? Yeah. It was like, what was it, a good one or a bad one kind of moment? Like, yeah.
What gun which one was it? Just a small one.
Yeah.
Probably just like a handgun or something, but yeah. To begin with, he's not so happy. But then later in the episode, we see, I think he could give up a gun or two.
Yeah, you think? just a little bit. His whole arsenal is just massive.
Between the two of them, they only have 4 hands. You can only use a maximum 4 guns at a time.
I mean, with the way Bill was, he could probably shoot with his toes, honestly.
That's fair. That's sort of their loving couple moment, especially when Bill says, I was never afraid before you showed up. And now, like, it's in that moment where you're like, yeah, no, these two are properly in love, because, yeah, he's actually afraid to lose someone now, rather than if the infected come and swarm this town, so be it, it's just me. Whereas now he just like, he has someone to protect and fight for.
Right. Absolutely.
And then we get the invaders sneaking up on the township, and Bill's cool contraptions come into effect with, we saw him earlier building this weird like angle grinder contraption. Like, oh, what the heck is this? And it turns out it's basically a sparker to build giant flamethrowers.
Yeah, it was really cool when they finally like shot off and did their thing. It was really cool to watch.
Yeah, imagine that was pretty terrifying as the raiders. You walk in and all of a sudden there's like half a dozen angle grinders going off and there's just big sparks. And like, what the heck is this? That's not going to hurt me. And then the flames hit. And you're like, oh, Jesus.
Yup, I'm done for.
I thought that was very cool. And then Frank wakes up and Bill is already out in the middle of a gunfight in the absolute worst position possible. Just middle of the street, no cover, against multiple enemies.
Yeah, he's
so,
just
what are you doing, bro?
guns ablazing, balls to the walls. Let's go. Like, I'm not afraid of you.
Yeah, when Frank looks out the window and you just see Bill in the middle of the road with just a rifle, you're like, oh, what are you doing, bro? There's literally no cover there. You are in big trouble, and turns out he gets shot in the stomach.
Yeah, it's not so good.
And as sort of Bill sort of starts to fade, he's running through his survival plan with Frank and basically just says, call Joel. He can look after you. And I think that's when you realize, okay, they have been working together. He kind of does trust Joel now, which is a very sort of another moment where you see the growth in these characters.
Yes. Which is really, it's good in a way, and like it's good to know that, you know, even though they got off to a bad start or, you know, a little rough around the edges, they really did look out for each other in a whole.
Yep. And then we get the final time jump of the episode. We go 10 years later to 2023, which is the same time period that everything's happening with Ellie and Joel in Boston, and we see the painting of painting that Frank's doing of Joel, which looks exactly like the game version. I thought that was very cool.
Oh, that is really fun.
Yeah, so it looks the person in the painting looks like it's Joel from the game. I was like, that's cool. They're old men now. Frank confined into a wheelchair and has to take a bunch of meds, and he wakes up one day and decides this is going to be my final day, and it's like, oh boy, this episode's about to get real sad.
Yep. No, but like they gave you a mini warning, as in like, oh, it's my last day, but at the same time, there was no warning. It was just like, oh yeah, here we are, this time frame, and we're done.
Yeah, and you can see Bill is devastated by this news, and he goes through like the whole range of emotions of grieving, where he's kind of shocked, he's bargaining, he's angry, he's just like, we'll find a doctor. And Frank reminds him, there wasn't a cure for this before the world fell apart. What makes you think there is going to be one now?
Yeah, it's a really sad kind of moment, but you know, he wanted to go out like with it on his terms, I think, which is, I guess, better than, you know, being attacked by the infected or anything like that. Like, he got to choose that for himself, which was a kind of sweet kind of thing in a weird sense.
I think he also didn't want to become a burden for Bill as well. Like, you already see that, yeah, he's confined to a wheelchair, so he can't really help out around town or getting, like, producing the food and everything. He's kind of just, he's stuck at home. He needs, it's forcing them to trade more with Joel and Tess for the medications as well. So yeah, I guess he just decided he didn't want to be a burden anymore. But we get that really loving moment where he says to Bill, I've had more good days with you than I have with anybody else, so just give me one more good day. And he wants to get married. He wants to have Bill cook him another one of his incredible dinners, but he also wants him to crush a giant bag of tablets and put them in his wine so that he can go out that way.
Yeah, it was a really sad moment. Like, the whole setup was, it was, you know, what he wanted to do on his final day, but at the same time, it was still really sad to just watch that whole process go through.
And, like, when Bill's crying, Frank asks, do you love me? And Bill says yes. And he goes, well, then love me the way I want you to. Which is, a very sad moment, like, totally heartbreaking sequence. And then, like we said, we go to their final dinner together. They are right next to each other, which, shows how close they've come from opposite ends of this giant table to now.
So right next to
essentially,
each other.
being one unit. And they pour the wine. Bill pours the whole bag of crushed up tablets into the wine and see Frank basically drink it all down in one gulp. You're like, okay, this is it. It's about to happen. And for me, because I knew what the game was, I assumed it was just going to end up being, Bill's going to watch this happen. And that's why he's kind of this real curmudgeon character in the game, like kind of like he is at the start of this episode. Yeah. But then we see Bill scull his whole whole glass of wine as well. You're like, well, hang on.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, watching it, being like, oh, is this going to be like a failed double suicide type thing?
Yeah.
And Bill's going to survive it, and that's why he's so grumpy, because he wasn't supposed to be around. But you see Frank realize, wait, why did he just drink that whole thing of wine in one go? That's suspect. And he asks, there was already pills in the bottle, wasn't there? Bill just goes, yeah, enough to kill a horse. So you're like, okay, they're both about to go down.
Yep.
And Bill basically tells him, this isn't the tragic suicide at the end of the play. I'm old as well. I'm satisfied. And you were my purpose. And Frank replies, I don't support this, but it is incredibly romantic. And you're like, okay. They are both...
Yeah, it was really sad.
They are both about to die. And that was such a heartbreaking moment, watching them just walk off to bed together, or go off to bed together. Like, Frank can't walk, but... yes, it's like, oh, yeah. Wow.
Because, like, Bill realized that he probably just couldn't live without Frank. Like, he'd be miserable by himself, you know, and he didn't want to live that kind of a life where he was just completely depressed and alone.
Yeah, and I guess, especially when he talks about Frank became his purpose. Like, if Frank's gone, what is the point?
Yeah, you don't have anything left.
I'm just living for the sake of living. I don't actually have a reason to be here. And like I said, it was a heartbreaking love story, and kind of continues the whole theme of the overall series being all about love as a survival mechanism. Like, without love, what is kind of the purpose of living?
Right.
I was expecting it to be a failed double suicide, but it's not. One of the most emotional episodes of the show, and then we get to Joel and Ellie arriving at the town, and at this moment I was like, okay, it's going to stop being sad now. Like, we're going to get here, they're going to just move on and survive. I was still expecting Bill to have not died, just because of the way the game was, but the massive change there, and they go into Bill's house, and I think Joel quickly realizes something is wrong, because they've managed to get so far into town and like all the way into the house, and Bill hasn't done anything. They're like, okay, something's not right here. They look into the kitchen, and you see the table with all the food scraps still there, and the empty pill bag still on the dining table. While Joel's searching the house, Ellie finds the note. That was sad that she kind of had to discover it first.
Yeah, especially with her not really knowing anything about them. It's kind of like a really shell shock kind of moment for her, I think.
And I like that Bill knew that by leaving this note, Joel would ultimately be the one that found it, because he basically says anyone else would have been electrocuted or blown up by the traps. So the only person that was ever finding this note was going to be Joel and Tess.
Yeah.
And the letter says, take anything you need. I never liked you, but it's like we're friends, almost. And I respect you. I used to hate the world, and I was happy when everyone died. But I was wrong, because there was one person worth saving, so that's what I did. And then I protected him. That is why men like you and I are here. We have a job to do, and God help any motherfuckers who stand in our way. I leave you all of my weapons and equipment. Use them to keep Tess safe. And I think, that line, you can see on Pedro's face that's the moment that breaks Joel, and he has to literally walk out of the house and have a moment alone away from Ellie, because it's too much, and he kind of doesn't want to burden her with that.
Yeah, because he's realizing, like, if he if he was having trouble like accepting like Tessa's death, he's now realizing like not only is he accepting her death, he's also accepting the fact that like Bill's not there either anymore. Like everybody's gone. Everybody that he knew is pretty much gone.
Yeah, like everyone that he was looking after and protecting is gone. The only one left is Ellie.
Yeah.
It's time to let's shift focus and do everything I can to protect this person because I've lost everyone so far, so let's make sure this one makes it.
Yeah.
They get the ute.
It's a truck. It's a pickup.
So yeah,
pickup truck.
They get in that, and Joel basically tells Ellie, we're going to go find my brother Tommy. He's in Wyoming. He used to be a firefly, so maybe he can help us. But if you're coming with me, there are 3 rules. Never talk about Tess. Don't tell anyone about your condition, because if anyone sees that bite mark, they're going to shoot first, ask questions later. And do what I say when I say it. And I think Ellie kind of realizes, what else am I going to do? Yes.
Yeah, like I don't have any other options here.
Yeah. I'm not going to stay in this random house in the middle of nowhere by myself. Like, fine, I'll come to you. Come with you. And they explain why the 80s music was playing on the radio by saying, it was on this automatic timer where if Bill didn't go and reset it every so often, it would automatically just start playing an 80s playlist to warn Joel and Tess. Just so happened that they left right before that timer ended.
Damn. That's rough. I also love, I like Ellie exploring the truck when she gets in because she's never been in a truck.
Mm-hmm.
So she's like, is this a spaceship? And he's like, no, it's not a spaceship.
Yeah, no, it's just a shitty old truck. And I loved that she talks about it being a spaceship because in the games we find out that she has this weird like obsession and infatuation with space. So yeah, for her to call it a spaceship, I was like, okay, that's cool.
That's funny. And then I know you had mentioned before when we were talking before about the seatbelt moment when he has to sort of buckle your seatbelt, and she just stares at him. What are you talking about?
Yeah, like I don't know what that is. Like, what are you talking about? What the hell is a seatbelt? So yeah, he has to show her, and just before they got in the truck as well, Ellie got her gun. She's been asking for a gun for every episode up until now, and she finally finds one, and she's like, okay, stashing that in my bag without telling Joel.
Yeah, it's all mine now.
She seems pretty happy about having that, and once they start to drive away, Ellie finds the cassette tape in the glove box, a Linda Ronstadt cassette, the song Long, Long Time, and then they kind of drive off and they leave Bill and Frank's bodies undisturbed, and that was kind of just like, wow, that was easily the most heartbreaking and emotional episode. Like, losing Sarah was tough, but we did only sort of get 20 minutes with her. This one we got, a solid 40, 45 minutes with them, seeing their whole love story play out. So to lose them was kind of like, wow. And also because it was so different from the game, it hit me rather than the Sarah one I knew was coming. So it didn't hit me as much, but seeing this one play out, I was like, okay, Bill's going to survive until Joel gets here at least. And then we'll get the infected and raiders come through, and then all hell breaks loose and they have to bail and Bill stays behind. Right. But yeah, to just see Bill and Frank go out together, it was kind of like, whoa, but I didn't see that coming at all.
Yeah, it was a rough watch. Like, got me in my feels, and I didn't expect a show like this to actually have such a harsh kind of like emotional take its toll on me like that. But it's done a good job so far.
Mm-hmm. In terms of rating, what would you give this episode?
Oh, another 5. They've all been 5 so far. I don't think it's gonna change, honestly.
Yeah, I can't see there being a bad, we're not getting a 2 or a 3 episode in this season, I don't think, so far.
No.
Straight across 5s. So yeah, easily the episode with the biggest changes to the game, but I think they were all very well done in terms of being able to explore this story more, but doing it in a way that adds to the story rather than being a dramatic change just for the sake of making a dramatic change.
Yeah, it worked. It wasn't forced. It didn't feel like it was a forced addition. It was a nice, like, transition into it.
And seeing Bill and Frank go out in that way made sense too. Like, even though in the game Bill survives, it made sense that he went out with Frank rather than, okay, we're just making a change so that we don't have to have this interaction and have this big battle sequence. Like, it fit with the story and, like we said, made it way more emotional than it perhaps would have been if Bill had survived.
Absolutely.
Because we would have probably needed another 25 minutes to then deal with Bill's emotions afterwards.
Yeah, it'd been bad.
So that's The Last of Us, episode 3. Thank you everyone for listening to the commentary booth. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe on podcast services and on YouTube. You can follow Corrina on Instagram at Miss Corrina Renee, and you can follow me on social media at JamyApps Media and at Pario Magazine.
Thanks for having me.
The Commentary Booth is a fan-funded production of JamyApps Media. You can support the podcast alongside our magazine, Pario Magazine, on Patreon at patreon.com/JamyApps Media. The following people supported at the publisher level or higher, and you cannot fathom how incredibly appreciative we are for their support.